Alright guys, so if you were wondering why all video games are starting to suck recently, don't worry, you're not the only one. I'm actually wondering the same thing too. Or at least that's what this video is telling me. So let's watch it together. You guys can catch my reactions and we can talk about what is causing the decline in video games and sort of maybe what we think we can do or what we think we would like to see in the future.
There's no medium that's evolved in the same way as video games. In less than half a century, we've gone from primitive pixels to graphics indistinguishable from real life. So the big question is, why do so many modern titles have such glaring issues? I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 reasons all video games are starting to suck.
Alright, so I'm really curious about this because I do feel like there's nothing new coming from the industry at all anymore. And every time I see a new video game, or I start to see a new video game, or I play a new video game, I kind of feel like I've done it all before. And I'm curious to see sort of what their take is, because it is very hard for me to like really get excited with video games anymore. So I'd like to see their take. Oh, you like What Culture? Well, let's see what they say.
Number 10, over-marketing.
You've gained a new addiction to Satisfactory. Is that even out yet?
Resident Evil Village trailer was released, viewers went crazy over Lady Dimitrescu due to, just look at her, she's epic. Rather than leaving well enough alone, Capcom went nuts, pumping out clips, teasers and posters revolving around the Countess. Even though Village was well received, players were disappointed to learn that Dimitrescu didn't play a major part. Although the trailers implied that she was the antagonist, she exits the story before the halfway point.
That is true. That is true. Big lady can smush you. Big lady can smush me. They did a good job with her design, right? It's good. It's still in early access. What exactly is it? I think I've seen Neebs and them guys play it, but I'm not entirely for sure. It's a survival game, right? I'm pretty sure it's a survival game. But yeah, I can see that as sort of a thing. Like a lot of marketing sort of focuses on the things that people are liking. Like they focus test it, they find what it is, they push the shit out of it, and then when you play the games, whatever they were pushing is either just a footnote or not even that important, and it feels sort of backhanded in the marketing. It's like Tycoon, it's a very good way to waste time. Sometimes you need a good way to waste time, though.
Annoyingly, this sort of over-marketing happens all the time. Because Far Cry 3 sold Vas Montenegro as the big bad of Far Cry 3, gamers were confused when he was killed off before the climax. But this doesn't just happen with characters, but with the games themselves. An exorbitant amount was spent on the marketing costs for Destiny, No Man's Sky, and Cyberpunk 2077.
Yep. And we know that all of those games did not do very well when they first came out for a plethora of reasons. Either technical, story shortcoming, or just outright deceptive marketing strategies.
Even though they all received underwhelming reviews upon release. If the creators repurposed some of the marketing money into the games themselves, it would have worked out for the better.
But you know what? The companies don't care because they already sold the games. Like, yeah, it put a bad taste in people's mouths, but they didn't care. They already got paid.
If these characters prove to be popular, we don't need them shoved down our throats. If the games can stand on their own, we don't need to be reminded of them every 5 minutes.
Man, wasn't No Man's Sky like such a disappointment, though? Like, I really got the game, and I had hoped for a lot more than what was there. I enjoyed the game when it came out, but it was in no way what I thought it was going to be, for sure. Cyberpunk, I couldn't even run on my laptop at the time because I just couldn't push enough frames to even run it.
Number 9. AAA games are designed to be addictive, not good. A lot of addictions start off as fun, but quickly come across as monotonous. Sadly, gamers are well aware of this, since many modern titles are designed to keep you playing whether you want to or not. For example,
That's true, though. Like, it's definitely sort of a loot box, sort of dopamine farm simulator where you're just coming back to do the things to get the item just to get that hit of dopamine, even though you really don't want to do the thing. You tried running the Ascent and it wouldn't even run on your PC. I don't even think I played the Ascent. But isn't that such a bad feeling, especially when your PC is like over the minimum specs?
Many games have a reward system which offers gifts to the player if they perform a specific activity within a certain time frame.
Or that's the worst. So that's another really bad one. They're saying a specific activity in a specific time frame. But even worse when it makes you do something in a way you don't want to. So you're playing a first-person shooter, and you don't like using pistols, but you have to use pistols to get like so many kills, and you don't want to fucking do it, but you don't want to miss out on the object. So then there you are caught doing it. You know what I mean? A bit late to the discussion. I feel like the reason video games are starting to suck, mostly because AAA games are getting lazy, copying each other. Yep. Indie games developer, instead of copy-pasting gameplay. No, I agree. The indie studios are working to try to do the revolutionizing, but the studios are just small. And a lot of times they'll put out something that's halfway decent, but it just can't compete. Do you know what I mean? Or people just have a bad taste with indie games. Like, I've gotten to the point where I have a bad taste with a lot of indie games because they start out strong and then they go weak. It's a tough one for sure. That's the thing. They just run out of funding. They can't keep the passion going.
Right. Even though there are days where you might want to break from video games, this technique forces you to keep coming back because it makes you feel like you're missing out if you don't.
So FOMO is a thing, right? And I know a lot of people are pushing against FOMO. I don't know how I feel about that because I know FOMO is a way to sort of make people do stuff so they get the thing, right? Fear of missing out, FOMO. But as somebody who plays particular games hardcore, you want to have something you can show off. And that doesn't feel fair to the people that haven't left the game that the stuff that they were able to get or they had to be there or grind for just then becomes either diminished by just being given out to everybody, or everybody can get everything and it takes away that sort of prestige of getting certain in-game items. So FOMO is one of those things where, like, I'm kind of in the camp of I'm okay with things being limited time, or things you have to do to make it happen. While I understand it's not good for the industry in a whole, and while we just talked about how it can be sort of bad, it does reward people who did stay there and were loyal. And I'm not a big fan of just giving out participation ribbons to everybody in gaming because we do that everywhere else. So that's a tough one. Great example. Favorite game of all time is indie game. Good old Stardew, one of the best games ever made. Somehow managed to dodge the lack of funding, was able to stay afloat till the end. And Stardew's done very, very well and has developed a very, very good cult following. And it's a testament to what you can do with limited resources and limited funding and still make a fun, inventive sort of game. And I think Stardew's a great game, and it is a good example.
The scary thing about these addictive methods is the fact that they're deliberate. In recent years, more and more games are following the rules of Skinner box conditioning, which was designed to mold the behavior of lab rats. Gamers are rewarded with an impressive visual and relaxing chime after they perform simple tasks, to encourage them to keep playing. Because reward systems are constant and never changing, it gives players a scheduled dopamine fix and makes them feel like they can never stop playing. The fact that developers are tweaking their games to hijack our brains isn't just depressing, it's a little frightening.
And that's what we just talked about. Everything is about trying to get that dopamine hit to your brain. And I think part of that is because the games that we play either are stale or become stale really quickly. And the only thing to keep us there is this artificial dopamine hit through unlockables and cosmetics and FOMO and stuff like that, because the games themselves really aren't that engaging and don't really have that much replayability anymore.
Number 8, turning everything into a collectathon. Not only did Super Mario 64 revolutionize 3D platforming, it showcased that a game focused on collectibles could be hugely addictive. Many titles followed in Super Mario 64's footsteps by incorporating collectathon missions into the gameplay. Unfortunately, a lot of modern games insert collectibles just for the sake of it. Did you enjoy solving all those Riddler puzzles in the Batman Arkham series? Did you not feel like you wasted your time after retrieving all 500 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, I think that, well, come on in, Rhea. How are you doing? I think that in-game collectibles need to be tied to something that is like a tangible reward in-game, and what you get should be of equal value to the amount of time that you invest. And I do feel like a lot of times it's just not anymore. And it is just a way to prolong your sort of time in game. That way you're still playing it when the next DLC, when the next cash shop skin or something like that comes out. It's just a way to prolong your in-game playtime without really giving you anything back for the amount of time that you went through to do all that. There were a lot of older games that used a similar type system, but you ended up getting something very strong or very powerful. After you went through all the hoops or collected all the things or did all the rare side missions, you would get an ultimate weapon or something of superpower, and it made it worth your time. Now it's just you collect them all to tick off a box just to walk away. So, Lyrical, you don't like games as service, FOMO, and trying to create addictive gameplay, using bad habits to create games instead of just being fun. That's why you quit most multiplayer gaming. And that's what we were talking about earlier, right? I know FOMO and games as a service is a hot button issue for a lot of people. And there are a lot of people that don't like the FOMO aspects because of life and everything else, and that's a very reasonable take on it. And I do agree that those types of things are just there to incentivize you to play because the game gets boring and tedious, and they just need to find a way to keep you there. But I do like the idea of rewarding people who did continue to play the game. So hopefully maybe the industry will find a way to reward people without de-incentivizing people at the same time.
Only to be rewarded with a piece of golden poo.
Good, working on a certain big man's face to see if he likes the new version of a thing. I'm sure he'll like the new version of a thing.
Ironically, even Mario has fallen into this trap. In Super Mario Odyssey,
especially when you're more of a filthy casual, not really hardcore, very few games can do it right. That's true, and that's the thing. Like, I look at things as a full-time content creator, but as your average gamer, your average day-to-day gamer, gamers don't always have. You can't always put in that many hours, so that's why I agree that there probably needs to be a difference, and using the FOMO system can be good in one sense and really bad in another. It's rare these days you'll even buy a game upon release. That's because most games aren't good at release. Most games are either completely broken or it's just the same type of game as every game you've been playing, and they're fucking boring. Welcome on in, Centaur. Thank you for banging me.
you have to defeat bosses and wall kick across skyscrapers to collect power moons. Other times you just need to walk towards a small mound or sit on a bench to acquire these collectibles. If the developers are putting minimal effort into how the player obtains these items, why have so many? At a certain point, you don't feel like you're playing games like this out of enjoyment. Instead, you're just collecting stuff because you've been conditioned to.
Exactly. It was a lot different when there were 5 major collectibles or 10 major collectibles, but they gave you something worth having. Now you're collecting 5 different sets of 50 collectibles, all for literally nothing.
Although there's nothing wrong with collectibles, they shouldn't be
Did you jump, Lamia?
used as an excuse to superficially pad out your playthrough.
Exactly. The collectibles should give you something good. They shouldn't just be a artificial time sink. Or it's actually a very real time sink to artificially extend playtime. 5 different sets for an achievement and a pat on the back when you're done. That's the thing. Like, they don't even kiss you afterwards. They just fuck you and walk on.
Speaking of which, number 7, superficially padding the playthrough.
We literally just talked about this. Mako Seeds and Lost Ark. Well, that's what they were just talking about, the ones in Breath of the Wild or whatever, how bad they were.
Now that modern games boast hundreds of levels, thousands of NPCs, millions of lines of dialogue, and a world big enough to get lost in, it seems impossible for players to get bored. So why does it keep happening?
It happens because the games are bad. Game devs create these massive mega online worlds and these mega spaces, and then they fill them with nothing, and there's nothing in there, and there's nothing for you to do, and most of the spaces you never see because there's no real reason to go there, and when you do get there, there's nothing engaging to happen. So then the only way to force you to go to these major spots is to put a fucking collectible there that you don't care about just for you to walk there one time. I'm all about like bigger games and more elaborate game worlds and the games feeling realistic and alive, but part of that is making the spaces feel important and utilized, and game devs don't do that anymore. Don't worry, your game will be full of stuff. As long as your game's full of stuff, that's all I care about, Synthar. Yeah, the Kuroko's Bear lost over 600 due to cookies. Ugh.
The answer is simple.
That'd be enough to make me quit.
More isn't always better.
Well, they said you just get a golden poo for it.
You can be done and dusted with Undertale short.
Undertale. I think Terea told me that's the best game in the world and that I should definitely play it. Do you need my choice after this? I can pull up Discord anytime, and then we can start our Undertale playthrough.
Hike and Portal in a few hours.
I love it.
And yet feel totally satisfied. It's fine if a video game is long, but there's a right and a wrong way to go about it.
That is true. I would really enjoy a very good, very well-made 500-hour video game. The problem is, nobody fucking makes them.
A lot of RPGs have a section where the difficulty noticeably spikes, forcing the player to grind for hours until they're strong enough to progress. This unsubtle method to bloat the gameplay isn't just tedious, it's lazy. Hollow Knight, Assassin's Creed, and God of War may have received glowing reviews.
I haven't played Ragnarok. I did like God of War 2018. I didn't think it was terrible. It had a fun side quest, NPC, optional challenge, heck, even just rewarding you for the exploration. That is true, Viking, and that's part of it. Like, I remember playing some of the old Final Fantasies and some of my old RPGs, and I wanted to do the side quests, and I wanted to explore because I felt like I was rewarded for doing those quests and taking the time to do that. And I truly feel like most of that is just gone from a lot of gaming. Honestly, that was one of the games you got on release. I need to get a PS5. Like kids say, of pool. Gotcha.
But they still fell into the trap of stretching out the playthrough by relying on backtracking. Skyrim and Breath of the Wild.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about backtracking because some of it is, well, you either need to make a large expansive world, which is then gonna be empty of a bunch of stuff, or you're just got to make people backtrack. I don't know.
Dodge this issue despite being renowned for their length. Both titles give you so much freedom that you've got a lot of control over how long your adventure will be. If
Skyrim also has, like, Elder Scrolls has a very, very great modding community, and Elder Scrolls doesn't care if their games get modded. Plus, they're single-player games, which really allows for more type of modding, and that's another reason those games have really stood up to the test of time, is because, one, they're just such great sandboxes already, and the modding communities went out of its way to make sure those games look good and have different quests and different side quests and all the different things you can do.
If you wish to take part in a zillion side quests, there's nothing stopping you. If you intend to focus entirely on the main campaign, go for it. If all developers used this approach, modern games wouldn't be regularly criticized for being artificially elongated.
That's true, and that's why everybody's waiting for the next Elder Scroll game. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody's waiting for the next Elder Scroll game just because they know it'll be good. And it'll be a 10-year game. Deus Ex says open world with basically just giant levels, but it's not an open world, still linear. Multiple pathways to complete each level. It's big but not empty. See, that sounds like that'd be fun.
Number 6. Expecting gamers to accept broken games. There are a few things.
There you go. I'm fine with that. See what Lamia says. What was this? Expecting gamers to accept broken games. This is by far my biggest irritation anymore, is when games come out completely broken. And there's no reason for it.
Things more grating than getting hyped for a game only to learn it's borderline unplayable. Aliens, Colonial Marines, Sonic 06, and WWE 2K20 weren't just bad, they were undeniably broken. Why are AAA games like these being released when they're obviously not ready? Better yet, why do creators expect us to put up with this subpar practice?
Right, and then like they do stuff to patch it and make it better and then want everybody to come back, and it's almost too late. Do you know what I mean?
In fact, why do we put up with it?
We put up with it because there's nothing fucking else out there.
Marvel's Avengers was deemed an utter train wreck. Square Enix put out an apology, reassuring fans a patch would rectify over 1,000 glitches.
If you had 1,000 glitches that you had to deal with, your game should have never been released.
But why did it have 1,000 glitches?
Exactly. Great example is GTA. Yeah, GTA had some pretty rough ones. But like GTA Online is like one of the biggest games right now, right?
To begin with, 10 is too many, 1,000 is unheard of. Sadly, these issues have become so common, gamers have become desensitized to it. At one time, bugs like this could tank a game.
Well, at one time, bugs like this could tank a game, but that was before you were able to issue patches to games. Now, you can release a game in a semi-broken or almost a completely broken state with the promise of just 3 days later, you're going to release a patch to fix 80% of them. I've got to sneeze.
Nowadays, they're just getting a free pass. If you're
Yeah, they're getting a free pass.
concerned you might come across as petty for complaining about issues like this, then don't be. If you spent your hard-earned cash on a product manufactured by a billion...
I don't think it's petty to point out or to bitch when things are broken and fucked up and you paid for it. Like, if you went to the doctor and you were going to get your temperature taken, and you walked into the doctor and the doctor fucked up, put you under anesthesia and amputated your leg, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, you know, he just fucked up at his job. You'd be furious. But it seems like we don't hold all people to the same standards. And part of that is there are a lot of reasons we don't. But I feel like a lot of people get passes and a lot of companies get passes that probably shouldn't.
$1 billion conglomerate, you got a right to be ticked off if it's not up to standard. Number 5, focusing on everything except gameplay. Because entertainment mediums grow stagnant without innovation, it makes sense why developers are keen on finding new ways to enjoy gaming. Since there's been a heavy focus on VR, motion capture, and photorealistic graphics in recent years, the gaming world appears to be pushing boundaries more now than ever. However, gaming companies can become so fixated on a new mechanic or peripheral, they forget about the most crucial element, which is it good? Epic stories, mind-blowing twists.
And that's true, I think. I think a lot of it is people are focusing on the flashy thing because that's what sells, and definitely not focusing as much on the core mechanics of the game. And I think it's to gaming's detriment overall, but I know why companies are doing it. And it's because the flashy graphics and the peripherals and all that stuff, that's what sells. And the gameplay has just sort of become second nature as something you can do as a grind. And I don't think that it's good for gaming, but it is where we are and it does need to change. I think we need to go back to having better games. But the problem was back when you were 256-bit graphics, you couldn't make them look cutting edge. So you had to put together a good story and tell some sort of good sort of narrative to keep people invested because there wasn't really much to look at.
Cinematic sequences, badass bosses, extensive lore, and huge open worlds mean nothing if the gameplay isn't up to scratch. Stardew Valley, Wii Sports, Tetris, and Minecraft put no emphasis on graphics or plot. Nevertheless, they became astoundingly successful, purely because of their addictive gameplay. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. Square Enix spent years fine-tuning every aspect of Babylon's Fall. Despite the hard work put into this online live service RPG, it was virtually unplayable, forcing Square Enix to shut down the servers after less than a year.
That's bad. I've never even heard of that game.
Although not every game is as disappointing as Babylon's Fall, this sort of thing happens time and time again because developers forget to put the gameplay first. Number 4, annoying AI companions. How many games were
Yeah, they can be, some of them are fun, some of them are cute, and a lot of times they just become very fucking annoying.
improved upon inserting a whiny sidekick? None! And yet AI companions seem to be getting more popular, despite nobody wanting them.
So part of that is a culture thing. So like Zelda is a Nintendo product, and a Nintendo product is, you know, based out of Japan. And over there, like chibi kawaii culture is a thing. So having sort of like fun, cute, pseudo semi-annoying companions works well in the demographic that the game was made in, but doesn't always translate very well to Western sort of cultures. So you do have to take that into consideration on why they were there to begin with, but it doesn't mean that they haven't become so bad and so intrusive that it just sort of saps away any of the fun that they might have had in being in the game.
Having said that, the concept of having a computer-controlled buddy is fine. Not only does it add a bit of strategy, it forces you to be a team player. You don't feel as overwhelmed when entering an enemy-filled environment, knowing there's someone watching your back. On top of that, it helps the player understand the protagonist more since they have someone to banter with. So why do the developers feel obligated to make these side characters so very annoying? In Resident Evil 4,
And we're getting ready to see Resident Evil 4 because I think we're going to play the remake next Thursday, Friday, Saturday maybe? I don't think it's going to take me more than 18 hours to beat the game.
Leon is stuck with a screeching teenager called Ashley. It's not the AI companion
Leon!
concept.
I'm going to play the game in Japanese with English subtitles if possible, because I think it'll make it more bearable.
That's the problem, it's the character. As awesome as Resi 4 is, it would have been better if Ashley wasn't so irritating.
And I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure RE4 is a Capcom game, which I believe is heavily inspired by Japan and Japanese culture. I could be wrong, but if it is, then that would explain sort of why her character was written the way she was.
The same goes with God of War. It was a stroke of genius to reconfigure the vengeful god-killing Kratos into a protective father who'll do
I think they made her a lot less irritating in the remake. That would make sense because it's made to appeal more to a Western audience.
anything to safeguard his son Atreus. But let's not pretend Atreus doesn't get on your nerves hard.
Atreus was fucking terrible. Atreus was annoying. I hated fucking Atreus when I was playing through. He was such a bad character. And I know he was written that way on purpose, but I had no care for that kid at all.
Half the time. But what's worse than an annoying companion is an incompetent one. Your squad in Halo 5, Gears of War, and Left 4 Dead are so useless you'd be better off without them.
In those games, you normally just ignore him. A cocky, arrogant little shit. He was fucking terrible. I hated him the whole way. Yeah, and then once he found out he was a god, he was like borderline insufferable, but then you found out he was Loki or whatever.
Seriously, Tails from Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was a better programmed AI companion, and
Tails was awesome.
that game came out 30 years ago. Because AI companions seem to be getting worse with age, you have to wonder why.
Is he better in Ragnarok? I bet he probably is better in Ragnarok. I haven't got to play Ragnarok, so we'll have to wait. He grew up a bit. And maybe that was the problem, was he was a kid, and I don't have kids, so I have like no patience for kids.
They're becoming increasingly popular. Number 3, companies hiding bad reviews. Constructive criticism is rarely welcomed, but it should always be appreciated. If a video game receives a harsh assessment, the developers shouldn't be offended, they should learn from it to avoid repeating the same mistakes in the future. But because bad reviews can lead to a huge loss in revenue, gaming companies perform all sorts of tricks to hide negative feedback. Sometimes, reviewers must sign embargoes, preventing them from publishing their critique until a designated date.
So I feel like embargoes and review embargoes aren't necessarily or inherently bad, but I feel like they can be abused. The same way a lot of other sort of like practices in any industry are not inherently bad by saying like non-disclosure agreements. They're not inherently bad, but they allow bad practices and they can be abused.
Although Assassin's Creed Unity was the worst and glitchiest entry in the franchise, it sold well because Ubi didn't lift the embargo until 12 hours after release.
Dude, they waited until 12 hours after release? That's bad.
By which time
That right there should have been a red flag. There are no reviews allowed to be purchased until produced until after the game is released. That's a big red flag.
everyone had realized Unity sucked, but it was too late since a legion of fans bought it at launch. But it gets worse. Companies like Bethesda blacklisted critics after they didn't shower their products with praise. The developers of the War Z banned
I could see Bethesda doing that.
and any Steam users who disparaged the game while it was on early access. And Digital Homicide tried to sue Steam users after they lambasted their work. If these companies
I feel like it's one thing to come out and say something is bad, but if you as a consumer or a consumer group, even though their heart's in the right place by trying to like draw attention to something, is doing things like review bombing and stuff like that, that shit shouldn't be allowed either. If companies can't hide their reviews or like affect their reviews at all, then there has to be a sense of accountability for the people that are criticizing it too.
companies put as much effort into their work as they did in hiding their flaws, they wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. Number 2. Absolute bullshit. Video game promotions need to show off the property's biggest highlights to captivate viewers. But if the game is a bit crap, the marketing will rely on an ancient but highly effective strategy instead: lying.
And that is true. They lie, they show you CGI cutscenes, they don't show you anything in engine, or they say it's an engine, but it's not really what it looks like when you play it. They're showing you cutscenes that might not even be in the fucking game anymore. I've seen this time and time again. If I see anything put out from a game, like a game company, and it's not actual gameplay footage, and it's just CGIs and cutscenes, I completely disregard it.
Sometimes publishers will release game trailers that have no resemblance to the finished product. This technique, which is called bullshotting, has been implemented on many iconic games.
Yeah, like, see that right there? I can tell you just from looking at that that is not in-engine gameplay. That is not. So you can't use that to decide if the game's going to be good.
Consoles and peripherals. Killzone 2's teasers look nothing like the finished result. The tone of Dead Island's teaser didn't match the game at all. Trailers for the Xbox Kinect hid the fact the accessory didn't bloody work. Because word of mouth can make or break any product, it's imperative the higher-ups are upfront with their games, knowing it could tarnish their reputations or sink their company if they deliberately mislead their audience. But as No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077, and Gotham Knights prove, the industry isn't learning. There's always an outcry when gamers realize the game they
How you doing, Johnny?
purchase doesn't represent what's sold to them. This leads to frustration, resentment, boycotting, and mistrust.
I do think a lot of gamers over the course of the past couple years have started to wise up to it and are looking at things sort of the same way I am, where is this an in-engine shot? Does this look like gameplay? And trying to use some common sense when dealing with marketing. Knowing that marketing is always going to show off the best side of everything, you do have to look at it objectively and go, yeah, I want to think this, but does it really make sense?
It happens so often now, fans aren't getting angry anymore. They're getting tired. They're so bored with being let down, they no longer pay attention to promotions and instead wait for the reviews before risking being heartbroken again. Number 1. Studios do what they want, not what players want. When Warcraft 3 Reforged was released, it erased the original from existence. Not only were devoted gamers unable to play the classic ever again, they had to settle with a pitiful remake, rampant with glitches and technical errors. Even though nobody wanted this jazzed up version, Blizzard didn't listen and released it anyway. Sadly, Blizzard hasn't learned a thing since they did it again last year. Even though they promised Overwatch and its sequel could operate simultaneously, the first installment service was shut down, forcing players to update to Overwatch 2.
And that's shitty. If your company has come out and said, we're going to run both servers at the same time, and then they like backtrack on it, that's lying. That's not even deceptive. Those types of things should be addressed.
Although it's easy to harp on Blizzard, and we haven't even mentioned Diablo Immortal, it's obvious many other companies don't have consumers' best interests at heart.
And game companies don't have consumers' best interest at heart. They don't. Game companies are businesses. They have their stockholders' interest first and foremost in their mind, and what they think is going to make them money, especially if they know that their product isn't very good, or their product's not going to be very well received, or they've got analytics for all this. They probably know that certain games, or all games, make most of their money in the initial sales or whatever they're doing. And that's why they focus on just those things, and they push their agenda. If you think that a game company has your best interests as a consumer in mind, first and foremost, you're naive and you're wrong. They don't care. Like corporate responsibility and all this stuff, it's a myth for the most part. They will do whatever they can to increase their profits first, and then they'll worry about all the other stuff afterwards.
Rather than delaying
they can say they're like responsible, but at the end of the day, in their company credo and in their company's motto, it says something about caring about the stockholders way more than the stakeholders.
games, they're being released in their unfinished form because the developers know they'll make a profit purely because of the branding. Companies keep pushing gimmicky peripherals that don't work. More than ever, games require a permanent internet connection, even if it has no effect on the gameplay. At a certain point, you gotta ask, why are gaming corporations pushing for an agenda nobody asked for? If companies like this keep ignoring the gamers, a time will come where we'll start ignoring the games.
No, and I think that's the problem. Because companies know that you won't ignore the games. There are only so many games out there, and unless something happens across the board to make all AAA companies fall on their face, some giant mega lawsuit that just wipes them all out, they know that they're still there. And there's nothing that's going to change that, and that's why they do these things. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my thoughts and my take on the 10 reasons all video games are starting to suck. But you know what? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We can have a healthy discussion down there. And as always, have a great day.